Hello, patrons. This is Gary O'Toole. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that is um, potentially fear-inducing, and it's probably the last thing you want to hear to add to any of the crises that are upon us in terms of the pandemic. But I think it's important to speak about this topic because it puts things in perspective, and it's really important to do that, I think, at this time. And that is of the potential of a volcano eruption in Iceland. And I'll show you why this is astrologically significant at the moment. And just to inform you, because you might not be aware of it with all the news that's going on about the virus, of course, um, but that this volcano in the southwestern region or peninsula of Iceland is very active again after over 200 years. And actually, since 21st of January, according to scientists, they're looking at it, and apparently there's been more than 8,000 earthquakes. And so obviously, minor earthquakes, but that it's very active again after centuries. So the last time this occurred was in 1783, and it began on the 8th of June, 1783, and it lasted for 8 months until February 1784. So this had a huge impact on the world, and it is said to be one of the contributing factors to the French Revolution. And I've also brought a chart up here for the French Revolution, the kind of official beginnings of that, just to kind of highlight a few points astrologically. So why did it have an impact on the French Revolution? Well, of course, if you remember a few years ago when there was a volcano in Iceland, it grounded all the flights. So it just goes to show how connected and interconnected our world is, and that anything that happens anywhere in the world has a knock-on effect. So if that, and it wasn't that long of a spew. So this time, they're looking at, the potential for, as it happened over 200 years ago, and we hope that it won't be that significant. But again, just to show that whether it's a volcano or a virus or a pandemic, it has a knock-on effect on other things, and including and especially systems. So you'll notice here, if you cast your eyes to the sign Capricorn, back in 1783, when this volcano occurred, Jupiter and Pluto were together in Capricorn as they are today. Saturn hadn't joined them yet, but it was very much linked with them because Jupiter and Saturn were exchanging their signs, Capricorn, Sagittarius. And there's a lot of this going on at the moment again, and they were all retrograde at the beginning of this. And they're about to go retrograde again in May. So by the middle of May, all of these planets, Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto, will all be retrograde. Pluto's the first to station on April 25th, and then Saturn on May 11th, and then Jupiter on May 15th. So for the next few months, till the end of the summer and into the autumn, we're seeing all these planets again retrograde in this sign. So it's worrying then when you see reports about this volcanic activity and the possibility of the impact, because when I was looking at 2020, I knew something big was going to happen, but I just felt it was like a long-term thing, and maybe even waves of things, many things. Like one of the things I said was that it's all happening in 2020. And I hope that that is just a case of, just dealing with the virus, and that there isn't something else to be, dealt with on top of that. But unfortunately, I do think that there is something else that's going to happen further down the line that is going to impact the world in a big way. And in a way, when we look at these transits, and to bring things into perspective for ourselves as astrologers, or just people looking at astrology for meaning in all of this, and or understanding greater, longer cycles, to understand that this takes some time. Changes take a long time. Pluto takes a long time. It will go through Capricorn for the next 20 years until 2040. And by the time it has gone through, it will have changed the world completely, as it did back in the late 70s. So Pluto was in Capricorn, obviously, at this time. It's back here again over 200 years later, and it's going to create some big changes in the world. And if I bring up the French Revolution, you'll kind of see what I'm talking about when we see these cycles. Just notice where Jupiter is and where Pluto is. And let's see, at the beginning of the French Revolution, official beginning, was Jupiter moving into the opposite sign. Pluto at the end of Capricorn, having done that whole thing through the whole sign, changing systems for breaking down things initially, because that's where we're at right now. We're only at the beginning of things breaking down because Jupiter just moved in here in February. So now it's going to take many, many years for things to break down. And in that breaking down, there are cycles of growth. There obviously are cycles where we can get things working again or develop new things and innovate all the time. But the French Revolution, for example, was when Jupiter was opposite to where it is now. So things have to break down first. And 6 years later, it began where people had a new sense of new hope. And that new hope spurred them on to make big changes. You can see that the sun was exalted as well. So there's a lot of strengths here. Pluto had done its thing. Saturn had done its thing with its own signs too. It moved through both its signs. And so it kind of gives this sense of, okay, what are we going to do now? What are we going to create? And so that's what I want to give you a sense of, whether, it's just the virus this year or whether it's some other catastrophe that is experienced that the world has to deal with to change. And big changes are happening regardless, whatever happens. And I'm reminded of that saying, which is really important at this time, that nothing happens, all is. And that's more important than anything, whatever does happen. So yeah, that's how I would look at this. There is a potential here and it's worrying, but it's also putting things into perspective. And that if we can keep that perspective of the world needs to change and it's not going to do so voluntarily, we need to change and we're not going to do so voluntarily. So when we're forced into changes, we make them. Now, the good news about what's happening today, and for this transit again of Pluto and Jupiter, is that Saturn is here again. Saturn is with Pluto and Jupiter in its strength in Capricorn, and it is at least making us more responsible in our actions. It is at least making us more stoic and, being able to take it on and do the necessary. And we're seeing, that play out in the world in terms of, the heroes, as people are called now, in the service industry and obviously in the nurses and the doctors that are dealing with the sick. They are the everyday people. Is Saturn, right? And that's what's coming out on top this time that perhaps wasn't there before. And that's what we have to really hone in on, because as things are and most definitely will continue to break down in our society, in our culture, in our systems, we have to kind of hold on to that strength right now and rebuild as we're breaking things down or as things are broken down. So that's my 2 cents about that. And let's see how it plays out. Okay, I'll leave it there for now, and until next time.